I'm Bryce Hagan for the Beacon Bolt, and I want to talk to you about social activism, protests, and how they've changed for our generation. Now, specifically, I want to talk to you about protests and movements that often garner lots of media coverage, public attention, and commentary from social media. I became interested in the subject in light, of course, of the recent Women's March on Washington, where 500,000 people participated in DC alone, while an estimated 3.6 to 4.6 people participated across the nation. There was even international participation, with protests happening in cities like Nairobi, Oslo, and Bangkok. The point is, participation in this event was huge, even to international levels, and the hype previous to the event was explosive. I hadn't heard anything about it, and then bam, all at once it was everywhere. Now immediately, the movement stuck out to me as problematic. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly, but something felt off, so I began doing some research on events that the Women's March reminded me of. First was Occupy Wall Street, this 2012 activist movement whose message was widely agreeable and well advertised, sparking interest and inspiring action in 2,600 cities. Their message? It was unacceptable that global wealth is concentrated in the hands of an elite 1%, while the remaining 99% can barely scrape by. The movement was hyped, and the Occupy activists had all eyes on them while they passionately nonchalantly hung out in their cool tent city. Turns out the movement's symbolic tent city just served to misrepresent the activists as drifters, vagrants, and freeloaders. They also lacked the passionate, confident, and articulate leader that every successful movement has had in the past, like Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi, etc. In addition, the group's message was unclear and seemed to become more about class warfare than about equality through reasonable government regulation and taxation. Then I thought I should take a look at the original 1963 March on Washington that the Women's March was inspired by. This, of course, being where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. It was a powerful event where 200,000 people gathered on the National Mall in DC, and it resulted in the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as the National Voting Rights Act of 1965. Speakers at the event delivered speeches that have gone down in history for their impactful articulations of race inequality in our country, and of the peaceful, unified nation we could still one day hope to achieve. Now we witness another March on Washington, and this one had over twice as many participants. But will they have the same impact and inspire the same kinds of changes? Their advertised message, which I think deserves attention, is of supporting and advancing women's rights and a call for gender equality. But what was missing was any details or suggestions for specific political change. While the entire event received quite a bit of attention and support, even internationally, not representing specific solutions as a unified voice is something I can see delaying any real political change. Some attendees were there for one cause, while other chunks of participants were representing entirely different causes, from reproductive rights to environmental activism. This kind of vagueness in how these activists outwardly presented themselves, I think, is what triggered my initial skepticism towards the march, because I felt like it didn't even know what it was. In America's past, successful public movements focused on clear-cut causes: the Vietnam War, civil rights, government bailouts and spending, and so on. From what I can tell, the Women's March was a weird event. It was weird, okay? It seems like it could go in two different directions from here. The first being a continued vague but passionate outcry on a wide array of very real problems, keeping the collections of ideas relevant and alive, but without generating any real or impactful changes. The other direction I see is one in which it's already headed slowly toward, in which the leaders of the various groups that each participated in the march while representing separate causes band together and turn this event into a sustaining movement. The March on Washington in 1963, which this event is heavily inspired by, was the culmination of years of local activism, and it was followed by the same. Understanding these insights and applying them to the Women's March and to what hopefully becomes a movement in hindsight means staying active and consistently pushing your causes forward. This, however, is harder today than it has ever been. In my opinion, the largest threat to advancing this cause is what's called collectivism. The term itself is defined as the use of social media and the internet to advance social causes. Collectivist organizations and leaders use common advertising principles and tactics in order to spread awareness quickly in order to advance their causes. Unfortunately, however, while using such principles and strategies is just as successful at garnering tons of views and clicks as it is in advertising, it's also failing terribly at getting those viewers to stay and actually do anything. Some people people alternatively refer to collectivism as slacktivism. In an article written for The Guardian by Michael White, co-creator of Occupy Wall Street, he describes this online activism as ineffectual marketing campaigns that spread political cynicism and draw attention away from genuinely radical movements. He accuses collectivism of ruining leftist activism as a danger to the left, and I couldn't agree with him more. I think this is why something felt off about the Women's March. I've seen a lot of positive leftist social media posts about different causes, but I'm still waiting to hear about most of their results. White describes the withering of real-world activist movements, saying, "Gone is faith in the power of ideas or the poetry of deeds to enact social change. Instead, subject lines are A/B tested." So separately, I had to look up what A/B testing is, and for anybody that may not know, it's when you upload 2 videos or set up 2 websites or blog posts, or in this case, subject lines, and you test which one performs better, then you use what you learned from that for future productions and stuff. So anyway. And messages vetted for the widest appeal. Most tragically of all, to inflate participation rates, these organizations increasingly ask less and less of their members. The end result is the degradation of activism into a series of petition drives that capitalize on current events. Political engagement becomes a matter of clicking a few links, promoting the illusion that surfing the web can change the world. I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying, but I also think leaving it there would be a pretty dark perspective. Hopefully the illusion that collectivism presents will be overpowered by a cause's importance and by the passion of those who care. I think that if the American population, or the population of any nation for that matter, really wants to change the status quo, they can, but only through the true sacrifice of their time, money, and most importantly of their energy. For now, collectivism seems to impede the progress of social revolution, but it may not be that way forever. Michael White is hopeful, predicting that a new breed of activists will arise. In place of measurements and focus groups will be a return to the very thing that marketers most fear, the passionate, ideological, and total critique of consumer society. Now, what do you think? Are the possibilities for social revolution different now than they used to be due to this collectivism? Let me know. I'd love to hear some responses and understand some other perspectives. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Big thanks to my friend Clay, who made the audio track for this episode. So all the music you were hearing in the background is from him, and I'll provide some links in the description below for you to check out his work.